Hey guys, welcome to the first podcast of the series. I'm really excited to share this with you because I've been interviewing Luke today, who is a friend and classmate. We both study psychology, and we have talked about some incredible insights, some nice gems of wisdom that I really want to share with you. So, without further ado, put your headphones on and go and do the dishes or go for a walk and listen in. I hope you enjoy. All of the different things that you've done in your lifetime so far, you're paragliding, you're studying business, living in a different country as well. You've had all of these experiences. My first question, though, is how did you come to study psychology from all of the experiences that you've had?
Mm-hmm.
What's led you to studying this in this country?
Okay. Do you want the short answer or do you want the long answer?
Short answer first and then long answer.
The short answer is that in 2018, my best friend committed suicide. He'd been suffering or living with bipolar 2 for quite some time. And my father had bipolar 1. So he confided in me, and I think he trusted that. To start with, I think he trusted in me because I had experience with someone with bipolar in my life. And so he and I became very close, and he became my best friend. In part because I understood his ups and downs. But we also connected on many different levels. He unfortunately committed suicide. I had no idea. I feel like I should have seen it coming, but ultimately, you can't stop those things if people have decided to go down that route. But I didn't deal with that very well, and that has a lot of personal background from my childhood and upbringing, where I didn't know how to, and I also didn't deal with my emotions well at all. And so that experience kind of went and kind of got pushed down with everything else in 2018. Unfortunately, in the same year, my wife and I, by choice, but partly because of need, we moved to Auckland for 6 months. We had started a business up there, an extension to our current business here. And it wasn't going very well. It just needed someone with a bit more experience to just try and push it along and try and, we knew that there was an opportunity there. We knew that the potential was big. And it just needed someone with a better experience to kind of get things going. And between myself and my business partners, we decided that Chantal and I would go out. Dom was still with her. I think Dom was 3, coming up 4. So he hadn't gone to school yet. He was still in preschool. It was relatively easy for us to find preschool. And we were both working for the company, so she was financial manager for the business. That burnt me out really bad. It was a lot of responsibility, it was a lot of work. I was probably doing 13-hour days, often 6 days a week, living in an unfamiliar town, in an unfamiliar house, not looking after myself well. Off the back of breaking my back in 2015 and dropping pretty much all exercises I was doing, and I got lost, I think, really. And then I sort of didn't really know what to do. This is all I had done as far as work. I'd worked for our family business. I had helped run our family business. Pretty much consistently since 2007, but before that I worked from 95 through to 2007 pretty much exclusively. I'd done a couple of stints doing some other things. So this is all I had ever done. I knew this business, I understood it, and so I was lost. I didn't know what to do. And so after I had a breakdown, I think that got shoved down with all the rest of the feelings, and I just kind of limped along, and coping mechanisms were still okay, but then, you know, the coping's just degraded over time until one day the coping just wasn't doing it anymore. And I had a second breakdown, which was massive. I went into a really deep depression. I was suicidal. I didn't know what to do with myself. Something had to change. And so I had started reading philosophy, particularly Marcus Aurelius and the Stoics, which was helping to some degree, meaning purpose. From there I discovered psychology, started looking into Freud, then Carl Jung, started understanding a little bit more about the unconscious, and then I decided that this is very me, but if you're going to do something, you've got to do it yourself. If you're going to do it right, you're going to do it yourself. So I decided that I will go and study psychology and see if I can help myself. And then from there it evolved to, I've had so much experience with being touched by mental health issues in my life. My brother suffers from depression, my father bipolar, my mother with alcoholism, and in hindsight, I think she was really suffering with quite bad anxiety, social anxiety, agoraphobia. No one really knew what to do about it, and so I decided that that's my path in life, that I want to help people. People like me, people like my best friend.
When did you decide that that was going to be your path, helping people? Was it before you started studying psychology or after? Because it sounds like your first motive to study psychology was for yourself.
Yeah, it was to help me, because I wanted to understand. I've always been, when I get into something, when I want to learn something, I want to do something, I need to understand everything around it. I'm not one of these individuals who is happy with just a superficial level of understanding. I need to dig deeper, and I felt like I needed to dig deeper in this and understand it on a much deeper core level. So it did start off as being about me, but as I got better and as I understood more about psychology, and as I started understanding how prolific mental health is, and that was probably the one thing that, if someone says to me now, what's the one thing you've learned on your psychology journey so far, is that we all have some issue somewhere. And if we could just find that and deal with it, because most of the time it's actually, you're able to deal with it, then life is so much better. And life has become so much better. I view life so much more positively. I understand my triggers. I understand when things are going wrong. And I just feel so much more in control. And that I really wanted to try and give other people that.
Gotcha.
Because it's so nice and so freeing.
I have to admit that I was the same when I first started studying psychology. I was doing it to understand myself more. And then as I went through the different courses and learned more about psychology, I realised that I did want to do this for other people as well. And it just makes me think about this idea of you can't help people if you haven't filled up your own cup first. You can't fill up someone else's cup. People have debated that quite a lot, and I'd like to hear your opinion on that. Would you say that you have to fill up your own cup before filling up someone else's?
I used to think so. Not necessarily. So I think I've changed my mind a little bit on that. I think there's, and this is broadly speaking here, but I think there's two types of people in the world. There's the people who are happy with a superficial amount of knowledge, and there's those who really need to understand to the core something. And I'm the first, I'm the second kind. I'm the one. I need to understand things really deeply. But there's plenty of people who I think, and this is why I think CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, works so well. And I think it works really well for those people who they're not interested, they just want to be given a set of instructions, and they're happy to follow those set of instructions as long as there's a result. And I think that's perfectly okay. And I think you don't necessarily need to understand, you just need to be able to deliver it.
Gotcha, yeah.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
Because I just wouldn't be happy with myself. I would need to understand it. But I think there is a place where you could just regurgitate a set of instructions, which, CBT's been clinically proven over many, many, many trials. And that's all it is a set of instructions. I don't necessarily think you need to understand them or have filled your cup, but I think it'll make a big difference.
Well, what do you think is the most effective strategy, if not CBT, then, for dealing with someone's issue? What have you come across so far that you think, that's the one that I connect with the most?
Childhood trauma.
Okay, yeah. And why?
Because it seems to be a very pervasive one. And I think when we're going through these critical periods, there's so many interactions we have in the environment, be it our parents, people in our social circles, in school, adolescence especially is, as you well know, is quite a critical period. Teenage friends and social circles aren't very supportive. In fact, they're quite the opposite. I think there's a hierarchical struggle that happens during adolescence, where everyone's trying to understand where they sit and where they sit in a social rung. And there's a little bit of a power struggle, and I think a lot of people come out of that with a lot of insecurities because there isn't a lot of support. There isn't a lot of, the driver is around superficial things like looks, kind of clothes you wear. And if you're not in with the mainstream in the social circles, then you're somewhat of an outcast, and then you're kind of stuck having to find your people. And I think all of those things do damage self-efficacy and self-esteem. And I think if you could find those things and go back and then try and understand those, then I think everything would go a lot better. So that's why I think that it's just developmental periods, right? The developmental periods are so salient, so strong, that when things go not quite 100%, and I don't think they do for anybody. I think everybody has something that someone said to them, someone who outcast them, someone who bullied them, a teacher,
You're saying if you can go back and understand those things more, then that would be better. And I agree. But this practice, what's it called again?
CBT?
No, the childhood trauma. Oh, okay. Yeah, gotcha. Sorry, I was thinking that would be working with the child and not with the adult looking back at the child. But you're talking...
I'm talking working with an adult.
With an adult,
yeah,
addressing the childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. Obviously, I think it's critical to help children too, if you can, in the family environment. But that's a lot more about working with the family. And oftentimes, or at least the literature will say that, almost all children who come to the clinic for behavioral type issues are brought in by parent. It's not the child who's suffering that is being brought, is asking to be brought in. So,
true.
But regardless of that, I think still there's therapies out there for everybody, even without understanding, and just be given a set of instructions. Let's take anxiety, for example. If you exercise, doesn't have to be a lot, 30 minutes of walking a day, eat well, and try and avoid highly processed foods, and have reasonably good sleep hygiene, then your anxiety will reduce significantly. Now, if you add to that some breathing practices, especially if you do it regularly, doesn't have to be a lot, 5 minutes a day, deep breathing, even better, a little bit of meditation, then your anxiety will get better. You don't have to understand why you have anxiety, where does it come from. It will get better if you do these things. And I think anybody could give a set of instructions and also follow a set of instructions without actually ever understanding why you have anxiety in the first place. Why is it bad? I think it helps knowing those things, but I think you could still improve your quality of life significantly just by following a set of steps.
I completely agree with you again. I'm going to be devil's advocate and go, you're saying these things, it sounds so simple to do, 5 minutes breath work per day, that kind of thing. But sometimes even just that 5 minutes of breath work can be really hard to do consistently. Or anything that helps with anxiety or well-being in general, yoga. What do you reckon? What do you think the most effective strategy for sticking to something, or making sure that something happens? 5 minutes breath work per day. What do you think What do you think is the most effective strategy to do that? Stick to something.
That's a hard one.
Did that question make sense?
It did. Yeah, it did. I think your question is, how do we stick to a routine?
Yes.
To a habit? I think that's your question.
Yeah. Well done. I used a bit too many words there.
The short answer, I think, is that I don't know. The slightly more thought out answer would be that I think it would depend on the type of person you are and understanding your own personality a little bit.
True.
Anyone who's highly conscientious is probably more likely to be able to stick. I think if you really want to truly understand yourself, anybody should sit through and do a personality test, a proper, decent, big personality test, to understand where they sit on conscientiousness, neuroticism, extroversion, agreeableness, openness to experience. The big five. There's actually another one which has also had some efficacy. It's called the Hexaco. It splits neuroticism into two. So there's 6 categories, but that aside. Most people stick to the big five. If you're high in conscientiousness, then it's going to be a lot easier to stick to. to any habit.
Mm.
If you're high in neuroticism, it's going to be very difficult to stick to habits.
Yeah.
I think understanding those things around yourself could potentially help you figure out how to put things in place. Habits are formed by repetition, and repetition is formed by just forcing yourself to do it. For me, when I really needed to do breath work, I set a reminder for twice a day, every day, and I would do my best to stick to that. If I couldn't do it in that moment, then I would leave the reminder, and I would just, it would just keep reminding me, and I would then find those 5 minutes, or I'd move the time to find a place where it suits you. I think until you get to a place where you stop letting life push you around and living reactively, it's going to be very difficult. And what I mean by that is, until you realize that what would you say the number one resource that you have and that you most frivolously let go of is? Time. Exactly. Yet we all go through life treating time as if it's completely there and it's going to be there forever and ever and a day, but it isn't. Time is the only thing you cannot get back. You can lose friendships, you can lose money, you can lose all those things, and you can still gain those back. You can always get more friends. It's not going to be pretty. You might be lonely for a while, but you can always get more friends. You can always make more money. It doesn't matter how much you lose. But the one thing you cannot get back and is constantly chunking away is time. If you let life bounce you around and dictate to you how that time is going to be spent, then you'll never have time for anything. And people will keep saying, oh, but I have this thing and oh, I have to. It's like, do you though? Do you have to? And until you really go, is it that I have to? Or is it that I'm being pushed into it for some reason? And start really looking at the intention behind why you do certain things. And there's going to be plenty of things, like you have to put food on the table, so you have to go to work. Fair enough. But do you have to go to Auntie Betty's neighbor's thing that, no, you do it because you feel like you're somehow responsible for that. And until you figure out a way that you can say no, and not no but, no because, it's just no, then you're not prioritizing you. You're prioritizing everybody else.
Very true.
And so to answer in a longest possible way, until you can say no to the things that aren't important to you, then you're not prioritizing your own time, and therefore you will never find the time to breathe for 5 minutes. And yet, that breathing, 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the night, is the thing that is going to stop your anxiety. Not stop it. It's going to alleviate, help.
Yeah.
Vicariously, though, through that process, what you'll also do is you find that there's a bunch of other things that, when you decide to look after you, then a lot of the other anxieties fall away too. Because now you know why you're doing things.
Right. Yeah. It's such an important reminder, because in this world where we have technology, access to all the information that we could possibly imagine,
Too much.
There's so much noise, and it's so tempting to just add to our lives, speed up our lives. But really, I found that in my case as well, whenever I kind of strip back on my calendar, just getting rid of things that actually I don't really need to do, and prioritize the things like breathing, the things that actually need to happen. That's when I feel most aligned to myself as well. I'm curious. I know I said that this wasn't going to be about success, but what is your definition of success?
Oh, I think that's probably changed many times throughout my life. So I'll preface this by saying it's okay to have your own version of success. I think everybody should have their own version of success, and I don't think I don't think my version of success is going to be your version of success or anyone else's. So I think, what is my version of success? Now it's slow mornings. It's having time for my kids. It's having date night with my wife and feeling connected to the people around me. It's working on my own well-being, on my mind. It's having the time to read a book and get lost in fantasy. And again, I think I'm able to do those things because my success drive when I was in my 30s was to pay off my house, not have debt.
Right.
And so I think there is a time and a place to be super driven, but there also comes a time and a place. And I honestly think that it's, in some ways, it's biologically driven. I think in your 30s, you do have a lot of drive to succeed and to build and to create. And you should use that because you have the energy to. I certainly found that when I tipped 45, a lot of that stuff started to wane off and I didn't have the same drive anymore. And so it became a lot more about stripping back, about what do I not need, and about having time and being able to spend time on me and on the people around me.
So 45, that was my next question really, is what made these definitions of success change? Was it more events like getting married or having kids that made you change these definitions of success, or was it just age over time, like when you hit 45?
I think there's a reason why midlife crisis happens. I don't think it's, I think it's biologically driven, and I think we all get to a point where, I'm going to try not to butcher this, but I think it was Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations who says that we all live two lives and we don't start living your whole life until you realize that you only have one.
Right, yeah.
And I think that's it. I think in that time you realize just how much time has gone. And there's a normative reorganization of priorities that happens. You get a little bit lost. You get, and for some people that might be a red sports car. For others like me, it might be philosophy. And I think for me, reading philosophy in many ways and kind of trying to understand both my own psyche, but trying to understand other people's psyche who have gone through a lot of this, it helped me realize that if I don't prioritize that time, and if I let life just bounce me around, then there's not that much left. And so I think that naturally prioritized that for me. I can't take millions of dollars, and I can't take success with me. I think, and again, I think it would depend on different people's of success, and some people want to leave a legacy, some people want to leave lots of money for their kids, whatever. But honestly, I think the best thing I can do is leave memories and experiences for my kids, and have those memories and experiences with me when I'm old. So many people I hear, working with people with anxiety, so many people are estranged from their kids because they didn't listen, they didn't stop to spend time with them, they didn't invest in the relationship. And they go, oh, well, my kids don't talk to me. Why? That's, because reasons. Okay, where's your part in that? Oh, I never thought about it that way. So, yeah. Did that answer your question?
It did, yeah.
Okay.
Memories and experiences, I think, are definitely one of the most important things to focus on in life, is leaving memories and experiences. That happens a lot with travel.
It does.
And I can't remember if I asked you this before when we talked about travel before. But what was your most... You've been to so many countries and so many places and had so many experiences.
And still not enough.
Yeah, I get that. Try and pick one. What do you reckon was your most pivotal experience while traveling?
Oh, it's so difficult.
That's why I say try and pick one.
I think, if I've had lots of amazing experiences traveling, but I think if you're going to... When my wife and I met, and we met fairly young, we very quickly realized that both of us wanted to travel. I just had this burning need to see more of the world. Obviously, I was born and raised somewhere in a different country. So I already had an experience of moving somewhere and being uncomfortable and being in a different culture and kind of being immersed. And I've really enjoyed it. I thrived in it. And so I think there was an innate drive there to have more of that. And she and I both realized very early on, and we just made a pact that no matter what happens, we might live on noodles for a week, but there's a certain amount of money that goes into an account from the two of us that we do not touch no matter what. We might go hungry that week, but the money for travel goes into that account and we don't touch it. And we both stuck to that. And we have it. I think we started when 2004, maybe earlier than that.
Yeah.
Maybe 2003 we started saving for our kind of first big trips. And it hasn't stopped, and it isn't stopping now.
Nice.
Money just goes into an account every week, regardless, for travel, and that's its sole purpose. It's travel and experiences. And so I think, to go back to the, pivotal, I think, was one, hitting that level of, hey, we stuck to this routine, stuck to this habit of putting money in no matter what. Now, where are we going to go? We have this money that we've saved up. And then the first place we essentially rocked in was Puerto Rico. Okay. And we're like, it was amazing, Different language, different culture, different people. It was so great.
I haven't been there before, and I haven't heard a lot about... I don't know what Puerto Rico involves. I know roughly where it is, but tell me more about your experience in Puerto Rico.
It was fantastic. Warm country, Spanish speaking, still, first world enough, relatively clean, lovely beaches. they make white rum. It was great. We loved it. It was just the experience of being immersed, being away, traveling. So good. So many experiences. We were intending to hire a car and drive around. But I mean, this is in the very early days of the internet too. So, we were going to internet cafes and, I think that particular trip we had to have an agent book. Whereas after that, we got much better. And I say my wife got much better at booking our trips. But somewhere we found online that you shouldn't antagonize the drivers in Puerto Rico because they can retaliate with gunfire. And so that terrified us. I mean, we didn't see it. It was not like that at all.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it was amazing. It felt safe. It felt very comfortable. It was great.
What exactly about that was the most pivotal? Like, why do you say that?
I say that because I think it's after saving for so long and dreaming and planning, to be there and stand on the beach and to drink a mojito, something changed in me. It was like, I never want to stop doing this. And so we never have. We've had some pretty rough experiences traveling, nothing super bad, but like dirty trains, delayed, sickness.
The inevitable. Yeah.
But regardless, our need to see different places and to travel has not changed since that time. Since standing on that beach the first time and just going, wow, the world is so big and so many amazing people and so many amazing cultures.
Gotcha. Yeah. Was it from what you're saying, it kind of sounds like the thing that was most pivotal about that journey was you working so hard and then having that payoff.
Having the reward. I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I think
gotcha.
so.
Yeah.
And they're going well, I'm sure there's people who will do that and hate it because they have a bad experience, but ultimately I think for us that was pivotal because it was success, reward, achievement.
Right. Yeah.
And again, an understanding just how big the world is, and when you realize just how far you have to travel to see these amazing places, you realize how many places there is in the world, and the more you see, the more you want to see. And then now you have to start prioritizing because you realize that it's just impossible. I'm never going to see the world.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure many people come close if they dedicate their life to it, but going back to success, what is success? Well, that is having a stable home, and that is providing a stable home for our children and grandchildren. So for us, it was never like traveling solely, but it was just another portion, another brick of the success, I guess, if you adding a brick to a structure of success.
Gotcha.
That was just one very big pivotal one to us. We certainly wouldn't want to give up.
Right. Yeah. Doesn't sound like you will.
I sincerely hope not. I sincerely hope not.
Yeah, I hope so too for your sake. Yeah. What's a slight change of topic? What's a mindset that you rarely see in others, but you wish you could see around more often?
I really wish that people could stick to something long enough to gain the success and the reward to understand just how good it is. And I mean that in the complete open sense to anything. Stick to a sport long enough to get good at it. Stick to saving long enough to go traveling. Stick to diet just long enough to see the benefits and the changes in your body, and how good your body can feel if you remove the crap out of your diet, the alcohol, you know, the highly processed foods. Stick to anything long enough to just feel that success and to just get that reward and go, oh my God, like I'm actually good at this. But unfortunately, stickability is one of the hardest traits that I have. People just don't stick to things.
Stickability.
Stickability.
That's a new word for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my prediction is that it's just going to get harder and harder to do. Yeah.
There's too many.
Future.
You said it before. There's too much information and there's too much distraction. And until you can kind of sift through and filter through what is important to you, there's just too many opportunities. And almost so much opportunity, it cripples you in a way because you don't know what to do and where you should spend your time. I want to do a little bit of music. I want to do a little bit of languages. I want to do a little bit. But until you actually stick to one thing and get good enough at it, I'll use myself as an example. So when I started flying, I started quite early. My dad flew hang gliders in the 80s in communist Bulgaria. So I grew up around it, and I always knew that I wanted to fly. It's one of those things that it was such a big driver for me. I didn't care what, I just wanted to fly. It just so happens that hang gliding was the first thing I did fly because my dad taught me to fly. And it was difficult. It was hard work. It was lots of frustrating time trying to understand air currents and how gliders fly. And, you know, it's not an easy thing to do. But that moment when you get just good enough to get into flow state and it's just you and a set of wings and you're just flying through the air and you're not thinking about flying anymore, you're just absorbed in the experience of flight. Getting good enough to get to that point, that was incredible. I mean, we could call it stickability. I think grit is something that gets tossed around a lot. And I think grit is a combination of sticking to something but also having enough of the fortitude to actually get through the really difficult bits. And I think when you mix those two things, you kind of end up with that component of, you know, where people talk about having grit. Yeah.
One thing that I've realised over the past couple of years is that I used to have a view that you had to love something before you learnt it. But then I realised that actually, in some cases, you have to learn something before you love it. And people sometimes give the advice of follow your passion. But sometimes you could argue that passion comes as a result of learning something. Would follow your passion be something that you suggest for people my kind of age, 20s, early 20s, to help them know what their direction is, what the next step is? Or would it be something else?
I think I'll say yes. I think you should follow your passion, because if you've got passion, then you've probably also got drive to learn, get engaged, get involved in that activity, whatever that may be. And ultimately, if you do something long enough, you'll learn it well enough that you could teach it. So therefore, it becomes, I won't call it a career, but let's call it a trade.
Okay.
You do yoga long enough, you could become a teacher because you understand it and you've learned it. It becomes a trade. You could lean back on it and teach it to someone else. So I think following your passion is important, but I think you also need to have the grit to get through the tough bits and not just drop said passion. If you've got a different passion every other week, then you're never going to get good enough at any one thing to actually appreciate the depth of experience you could get from that thing, whatever that may be. I think you also need to know when to give up and when you need to move on.
How do you know when to give up? It's such a good point. Such a good point.
For me, and I can only really speak for me it was always when the costs stop outweighing, when the costs become too much for the benefit.
Okay. Yeah.
Stick with the example of my flying. I progressed from flying hang gliders into flying paragliders. I started flying more and more competitive gliders. They get harder to handle as they become more towards the pointy end, towards competition gliders. They get harder to handle. They don't recover as well. For me, paragliding wasn't my career. So it got to a point where I was making too many risky decisions for not a lot of reward at the other end. So I think that's when I decided that I didn't want to push this hobby any further. I didn't want to pursue this passion any further in that sense, because I was going to have another accident. I swapped and I started flying airplanes. I ended up doing a particular type of flying. It's called bush flying. It's flying airplanes with big wheels, big tires, and landing them in random places like riverbeds. And again, it got to a point a number of years in where eventually I was going to end up with an airplane upside down in a riverbed, because I was just pushing too far. The rewards stopped outweighing the level of risk and cost. And unfortunately for me, I can't kind of do things halfway. I either need to be learning and progressing, or I need to move on to something else. So to me, I get to a level where I go, okay, well, I'm good enough at a particular thing to do it at a very high level. I've achieved what I wanted to. I've landed an airplane in some random places. Anything further than that is probably going to be too dangerous for me. It's time for me to now just move on and find something else to do in life. It just happened to be psychology. And so now I'm pretty much, I spend most of my time learning psychology, reading psychology, getting into it, because that's kind of the passion I have right now. So yeah, I think it is important to follow your passion, as long as you know when to also move on.
Yeah, and I like that equation. Very simple. When the risks outweigh the rewards. Why do you think some people feel lost in life?
I think in part because they haven't had enough experiences. I think you should get out of your comfort zone, particularly when you're younger, as much as possible. The older you get, the more comfort you seek. The more comfortable you get, the less experiences you try and find, which means that you get less exposure to different and random things, experiences, places, people. I think we get stuck when we get to a place where we can't see what the next step is. Certainly was for me. I'd been in the same industry, working with the same people, working on the same buildings for so many years that even I'd done all these things in my life, I got to a place in my career, in my work specifically, because I hadn't done enough things in work life to understand what else I could do in work life. And so I was kind of in this in-between place, like, do I make the hop to make one of my hobbies a career? Which is something I kind of always said to myself I'd never do because it would ruin my hobby. But I also I couldn't grow any further in the career, in the place that I was in, and I couldn't see where else to go, and it was very disorienting. It was very confusing. So I think that's changing your career, or at least expanding your career and moving and doing other things. You know, if we talk about that, I think the more exposure you have to different industries, different places, different people, I think the better it would be to not get stuck.
Yeah. It sounds like you were exploring, were having new experiences, which was nice, it was good, but because you weren't having any experiences connected to the work that you were doing already, that was why you felt a bit stuck.
I think so, yeah. That's how I felt, yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I like that. You have to explore, but also that exploration has to be connected to something you're already doing, so that there's a pathway for you if you want to take it.
I think so, yeah. I think so.
It's a similar question, but why are people so afraid of failure? Because failure is such a valuable thing. You learn a lot from failure, arguably more than success. But why are we still so afraid of it?
Because it feels horrible.
Why?
It's potentially inbuilt in us to stop us from doing it again. So if you fail, you know, I think on a social level, a lot of us don't want to look like a failure to other people. I think we also, because we feel so bad when we fail at something, we just don't want to have that negative experience again. But like you said, I think you actually learn a lot more. I genuinely believe that you learn a lot more from failing than you do from success. And if you could break down the failure, understand where you went wrong and what you would do differently, and a lot of that happens through self-reflection. If you can have that self-reflection, then I think it's very beneficial, but I think it just doesn't feel nice. It's just a horrible feeling.
Yeah, from what you're saying, I kind of thought, well, maybe the reason why we learn from failure is because of that fear of it not happening again. What's a time where you failed that you learned a valuable lesson from?
I think there's been many. I think there's been many, but let's just use. I think I felt like a failure when I got stuck in my life and when I was depressed and had a breakdown. I genuinely felt like I was a worthless human being who would just never achieve anything again. You stop seeing all the things that you did do well. And going through that process and coming out the other side, I now view it as probably one of the strongest character building things I've ever had to do is to dig myself out of that hole of feeling like no one loves you, you're worthless, you'll never do anything that's worth anything until you realize that actually you have done all these amazing things. And this too shall pass. And then I feel really good about that now. I feel like I understand myself better. I understand why I got into that place. And I feel like I'm a lot stronger for it going forward.
You said that philosophy was something that you were interested in around that time, and that it helped you through. Do you think that that was the reason why you dug yourself out of that situation? Was the philosophy, or was it something else? Was it you telling yourself, having to tell yourself constantly, you are worth something. You are.
I think it was certainly partly. Philosophy helped me I think philosophy helped me understand that my life is finite. So, and I got that out of the Stoics. So Stoic philosophy taught me that both good things and bad things just pass eventually. And you have to live in the moment and appreciate what is going on right now. And just find the thing to be grateful for in this moment. As horrible as it might feel right now, the sun is still shining. We live in a country that is arguably the least corrupt out of, certainly very little corruption. I'm well fed. I have a roof over my head. I have people who care for me. And, I think philosophy helped me grasp that better and have a better understanding that it's those moments that we have to find, the moments of gratitude to find in your daily life. Unless you look for them, you'll miss them.
True.
And also that time is finite, and that time is the number one resource, and yet time is the one thing that we piss into the wind on a daily basis for all kinds of reasons. I think from there, the other things that existential philosophy, so people like Nietzsche, controversial, I know. A lot of his stuff is controversial, but for me, existential philosophy taught me that I have control of my own destiny. And that if I don't pull myself out of the mud and out of the hole that I've dug myself into, no one will. They can't. People will try, but if I'm the one who's finding all the reasons why I can't do a thing, then I can't do a thing. But if you force yourself to find one reason why you can't do a thing, then, and that I learned from existential philosophy, from Nietzsche.
Gotcha. I haven't read a lot from Nietzsche, but I will after this.
Yeah, he's difficult to read. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube, and a lot of people have reworded his works to make it more palatable.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah. I have two more questions. The first one is, what is a goal you've set for yourself when you were younger that you've never achieved?
Oh, when I was younger, one thing I wanted more than anything in life was to fly an F-16.
That's a plane.
There is a plane, yes.
Okay.
There is an
I don't know
airplane.
about
It's a fighter plane. It's a very old plane now. But when I was young, that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to fly, and I just wanted to fly fighter jets. And I've never flown in a fighter jet.
I'm going to search up what an F-16 looks like. Ooh, okay. That looks cool.
Yeah. For better or worse, my father sort of said to me, listen, you're not good enough. You don't have the grades. You don't study well enough. Just, it's not going to happen. And I wish he'd never said that. I wish he was a lot more encouraging that way. But, I mean, it is what it is. I did end up flying all kinds of things. I've spent
Sounds like it, yeah.
25 years of my life flying. It's been fantastic. But fighter jet is one thing I've never flown in. But there is places. There's in Russia you can pay to get flown in a MiG. And I think there's a few other places around. So I haven't written it off yet. But moving to New Zealand, I realised that, one, New Zealand's Air Force is tiny. And we don't have fighter jets, so that was something that I kind of had to just put aside and move on.
Yeah. So when did you set yourself that goal? I don't know if you had it as a goal, but you wanted to do it. When was that?
I think from the time I remember.
Okay.
Yeah, 12,
Gotcha.
13. We moved to New Zealand when I was 15, so I was probably, I kind of had to put that goal to bed at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like maybe Russia is your next country to visit.
I'd love to visit Russia. Maybe not right now. Maybe not right now.
I was on a plane sitting next to a person who was about to visit Russia, or was about to visit somewhere but had visited Russia recently. I can't remember. Either she had been there before or she had done her research, and it was less than a year ago. And I said to her, "Isn't that a dangerous place to be at the moment?" And she said, "No, it's not, as long as you know where to go." And it gave me a different perspective of what we see in the news, about how stereotypical we can be to a whole country when that may be just a part of the country and the rest of the country is completely fine or completely different. And so, yeah, maybe that will give you a different perspective as well. Just hearing that some people do go and visit Russia just for a holiday, even now.
Oh, I'm sure that, and I completely agree with you. I think news is there for one purpose only, and that's to get eyeballs, because that's what gets money. Right. At the end of the day, the news is a business. Yeah. Social media is a business. Everything you see is about getting people to view that piece, whatever that may be. And like we were saying before, there's so much information now that it's difficult to discern what is real and what isn't. But I agree with you. I mean, Russia is a huge place. Most of the fighting is likely to be on the border with the Ukraine. Right. The rest of the country, although I'm sure that they're on high alert, they probably live just like you and I do and just carry on with their daily lives. And I think that's true of anywhere you go. You have to do your research. There's plenty of places where there's warnings of unrest or whatever, and there's a government. New Zealand has a really good website that gives ratings to countries that you're planning to visit and gives you an idea of the level of unrest or what to look out for in a particular country.
Right, true. Yeah, I have used that before when I was going to Nepal, and I found that really helpful. Just really insightful, just seeing all the different countries and what's going on. Yeah.
But yeah, if you just rely on mainstream media, I think,
it's just one perspective.
You'll get wars, murders, people died, of whatever reasons, because that's what gets the eyeballs.
Right. Yeah. I don't watch the news or listen to the news. Last question. What for you is a life worth lived?
Oh. Well, I think I've mentioned this to you before, but I honestly don't remember where I got this from. It's not my words. I got these words from somewhere. And I can't give credit where credit's due, and I apologize for that, but the meaning of life is to give life meaning. And I have lived by that for many years now. And that could be many different things to many different people. For me, that's spending time with people, understanding different points of view, expanding my mind and my experiences into things that are uncomfortable or different, and trying to work on my character, trying to be a better human being in every way possible, in the way I eat, in the way I live, in the way I treat people, in the way I treat myself.
Would that also be your definition of growth? The things that you've listed there?
I think, yes, undoubtedly, that would be part of growth. But I think growth happens, I think growth happens in the trenches. It happens when you go through a really difficult, tough time. You stick through it, you go through it, and then you reflect back on it. I think that's when growth happens for me. When I've gone through something really tough, I grow as a person. It's always happened, and when I've gone through something really difficult, I have found myself that I've grown on the other side of it. I think it's difficult to grow if you don't expose yourself to difficult things.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Those were some really insightful answers. And that was, great conversations. I think the reason why I said the other day you should start a podcast is because you're so easy to talk to.
Thank you.
And easy to understand as well, because of the way you explain things. It's very easy to go along the pathway that you are on.
Thank you.
In that conversation.
I appreciate it.
So I'm sure that whoever will listen to this, if we do publish it, they will go away feeling like they have a brighter perspective on life.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Or at least a different perspective on life.
Yeah, at least a different perspective, yeah.
And they shouldn't take mine. They should take mine and everybody else's and then make up their own mind. I think that's... I really appreciate your time. It's lovely talking to you. Always is. I appreciate the conversations.
Thank you, brother.
There's a lot more we can talk about too. Existentialism and meaning of life and all sorts. But Maybe for another time.
Yeah. My head's full already now.
Yeah.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video.